Right, it's 6 o'clock, so I hope it's okay if we can begin the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, so welcome everybody to this meeting of the Licensing Regulation Committee. The time is 6 o'clock, as I've said. This is the Winchester City Council meeting held under the new regulations which came into effect last 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name is Councillor Roger Bentote and I'm chairperson of this Licensing and Regulation Committee. I think most of us are used to the usual rules, but I'll just run through the few housekeeping things. We've already had a reminder to keep your microphones muted and your camera turned off unless you're addressing the meeting. I also advise you that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the website and then can be found on the meeting details where the recording will remain thereafter. And this meeting will now, MS Teams meeting will now be recorded with video uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Where appropriate for each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or raise a point of order or join in the debate, and then I'll invite you to speak at the appropriate time. When speaking or referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you give a suitable reference to the page, or in our case probably the polling station. Please note that the usual duration of this meeting is normally 2 hours, and any business not conducted by this time will be deferred to an alternative date or the next meeting. Finally, if members wish to leave the meeting at any point, could they please make themselves known to me on the Democratic Service Officers through the chat function, and we will announce that you are leaving the meeting. Can I ask Nancy, is it, who's going to undertake the roll call?
Yes, Chair, thank you. If I could just, I'll call you the name in turn. If I could just ask you to unmute your microphone and turn on your camera and just to confirm your attendance, please. Councillor Bentote, obviously, no, you're here, thank you. Councillor Atwell.
Yes, present.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Laning.
Yes, present.
Councillor Green.
Good evening, President.
Councillor Mather.
Present.
Councillor McLean.
Present.
Councillor Power.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Raffel. Councillor Raffel. Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Raffel. Councillor Williams.
Yes, present.
Thank you. I'll just try Councillor Raffel again because I thought I saw him on the call earlier, but doesn't appear to be there now. Councillor Raffel?
I can't see him on the call either, Nancy.
No. And Councillor Pearson is also here just as an observer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct, Nancy.
Can I also ask you to let us know which officers are present, please?
Yes, of course. We have Laura Taylor, Chief Executive, Karen Vincent, Governance Manager, Catherine Knight, Service Lead Legal, and from Democratic Services, myself and Dave Shaw. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy. So we don't have any apologies for absence, although Councillor Raffel is lost. Oh, Councillor Raffel, welcome. I think
we can see Councillor Raffel, but we can't hear you at the moment. Councillor Raffel, are you able to hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much.
The layout in this is so much different from planning. It's frightening.
Oh, okay. Well, you're here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. So Apologies for absence, as are none. Declaration of interest. If there are any disclosures of interest to be made regarding business, can you use the chat function to indicate now, please?
None indicated, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we move on to the agenda item, minutes of the last meeting. The minutes are on pages 5 to 6 of the agenda pack. It's recommended that minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of December 2020 be approved as a true and accurate record, should no member object.
Agreed.
Objections?
Agreed.
All agreed.
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 Okay, thank you. I think that's all agreed. I've not been informed of any public participation. That changed?
No, that's correct, Chair. No public
Correct.
participation.
Right, thank you. So we now move to the business item of the agenda. Starting, that is agenda item 5, the mid-review update to polling places, which is on pages 7 to 30 of your agenda pack. This is LR 537. After the presentation, we will have questions as usual, and I've decided it'd be sensible to split them into 3 parts so we don't get confused about anything. First, we'll just have general questions relating to the arrangements rather than any specific polling station. And then we'll move on to the permanent ones, permanent changes, and then the temporary ones. So I hope that will sort everybody. Karen, is Karen giving a presentation on this, please?
I am, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. If you'd like to go ahead.
Good evening, members and Chair. I'm bringing this report to you this evening as a mid-review paper. As you probably are aware, we are required on a legislative basis to review our polling places, our parliamentary polling places, on a 5-year cycle. The last report that came to you was agreed and approved. However, for this year, we find ourselves with some specific difficulties in terms of polling places, and over the last few years we have had some minor changes that we would like to bring to your attention, that we would like to make permanent changes. A considerable number of staff are going to be required to work during this election, and our recruitment has been a bit slower than usual due to concerns regarding the pandemic. Therefore, we have had some requests for additional polling stations in emerging communities, and for this year we have had to sadly decline those because we don't physically have the number of staff or the premises to accommodate them. It may also be necessary to merge some of our registers if our staffing difficulties continue, or if we lose staff due to COVID precautions, but we would notify everybody of those changes as soon as they happened. So this report really sets out the changes that we need to make to the polling places for the district. The interim review is necessary because of the changes of availability of some polling places, and we have to make some very careful decisions when we look at the numbers of electors who use a polling place, the locality and its accessibility for electors, to make sure that we ensure electors are given full access and are aware of where their polling place is. Hence, we are loath to move polling places at short notice, or the locale, because the people generally get to know the location of their regular polling place. However, there are some specifics in the report. You will be aware that some of our polling places have now been utilised as units of accommodation in what were former sheltered housing schemes, where those schemes have moved to general needs housing. The communal areas have been used as and converted into dwellings. And the loss of schools, particularly being unavailable this year because of the pandemic. However, they are difficult locations for us to manage in terms of access, and bring headaches to not only the electorate who have multiple access points or multiple locations within the school to poll, but difficulties to the schools themselves when they're trying to ensure the safety and safeguarding responsibilities to their children. The proposed permanent changes to the polling stations are all set out before you, and there has been some consultation, and I believe that the majority of the questions raised during that consultation have been answered to everybody's satisfaction. However, in the questions we'll hear if that's not the case. And there are a few changes that we have for this year purely because of the pandemic situation, in terms of a few locations being used for vaccination centres, and some taking the opportunity to have long-awaited roofing works, etc., to their premises, which mean they aren't safe for the electors to access the buildings. We have, as I say, the request of specifically around the Worthies ward and the emerging communities there is something that going forward we will continue to look at, and hopefully bring forward new polling places for those emerging communities. However, given that there is not a community building there as yet, and the school was the alternative location suggested to us, for this year we're not able to meet a request to actually increase the polling stations in that location. That's it, sir.
Right, thank you very much. So we move on to questions. I said, are there any questions of a general nature?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quickly, on page 14, you, and the last paragraph before the word therefore, you say that is not ideal for the electorate or polling staff, and full COVID security precautions will be put in place, sorry. Could you just explain with regard to porta cabins how this is going to be done, please?
Happy to assist there, Chair. Certainly with the porta cabins, excuse me, with the porta cabins, Councillor Reid, we've actually gone for larger porta cabins. So we will have an in and out in some instances. The porta cabins we've been used to have been very small and have barely contained a presiding officer and a poll clerk. We're sourcing our porta cabins from a completely different supplier who are used to supplying electoral services teams with large scale porta cabins that have on the toilets and small kitchenette facilities. So we're talking almost like a site office style porta cabin as opposed to a small 6x6. So we're minded to have the large porta cabins this time to ensure we can have the COVID security that we require.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you for that one. Councillor Power, you have a question, please.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Vincent, are we going to be having to change the traffic flow within the community centres? I'm thinking particularly of the community centre in Alresford, where we have a very congested entrance, and we always have trouble with bi-directional traffic there anyway. So will there be changes in individual polling stations?
Councillor Power, certainly we are looking at where possible separate entrances and exits. We are looking at meet and greet staff as you arrive at polling stations, because as you imagine, under the current circumstances, we'll be looking at electorate queuing outside polling stations, a family bubble or an individual being allowed in at a time. So it's about each individual polling station's flow. Where we can institute a one-way system, we will do that. Where we're unable to do that because of corridor sizes, etc., it will literally be one person in polling at a time.
Have we thought about allocating time slots to try to minimise congestion?
Unfortunately, there's nothing in the current legislation that allows us to do that, and we are bound, as you appreciate, by legislation, and we are hopefully going to use the messaging that the Electoral Commission are using to advise the electorate that it isn't going to be a case of come and wander in at your will. There are likely to be queues, and at some polling stations long queues, hence the postal vote messaging that's currently being advised from the Electoral Commission.
And will we be sending out letters advising people of the ease of registering for a postal vote in order to encourage that?
At the moment we're working on the campaign, and our Facebook, our social media feeds from the City Council are being utilised. It's a bit of a tricky question because, again, in the legislation, it is not for the electoral registration officer, i.e. Laura, to encourage people to vote one way or the other, although the messaging is heavily weighted on, whilst your polling station is a safe place, you may want to apply for a postal vote. So you know, it is that usual balancing act between explaining to the electorate what they can do and not being seen to try and influence them in any way.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Atchford, please.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned before about future polling stations. I just wondered if anything's been considered for North Whiteley as more people start moving in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, we are keeping an eye on emerging communities, as I say, and as the register builds in those areas, we regularly look at the number of electors that are registered in specific areas with a view to making sure that people have a local polling station as much as possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, I think you're on. You've had your question answered online. Is that satisfactory? I assume so, as I'm not hearing from you. Any other questions of the general nature?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I think just because this meeting is being audio recorded, it's probably useful if we say what the question that Councillor McLean asked and the response, just so we've got them for the minutes. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes, so the question was how many stations are different from previous years, and the answer from Laura Taylor was from 10 permanent changes and 8 temporary changes. Okay. Any further questions of general nature?
Yes, if I may, Chairman. If I may, could I just ask if there's any changes to the rule regarding telling, please?
Great question, Councillor Reid. There has been no legislative changes with regard to tellers in the confines of polling places. However, we have had local guidance recently, haven't we, used in previous elections. Our colleagues up in Cannock in Scotland who have been running elections throughout the COVID period have provided information to us with regard to tellers, and to be totally honest, they've had local agreements, parties have had local agreements not to go to the polling stations as tellers. Tellers are entitled to be there. They're an important part of the process. However, this year they will not be inside the confines of any polling place, purely because of the logistics of the COVID security we need to have in place. So tellers are still entitled to be there, but they will be external siting away from, and the problem there will be they will need to be away from the queue in a socially distanced manner too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll now move on to questions about the permanent changes.
If I may,
so permanent changes are listed on pages 10, 11 and 12. If you'd like to use the chat function to indicate any questions, please.
Chair, I think Councillor McLean has a follow-up question on the previous section.
Yes, please. Yes, I don't want to deny that, so please go ahead.
Right. Okay. It's really just the reply from Laura, thankfully, says, or thank you, says 10 permanent changes and 8 temporary changes. Should those be the things we're discussing? Because we're discussing licensing, not operational.
Take advice on that one.
Yeah, if we could, because we could talk all night about operational reasons, but that's we're here to discuss the licenses.
Thank you. If I may assist, Chair, given you've asked there, I think you indicated at the top of the meeting you would take general questions first, then you would move to specific points around the permanent and the temporary changes. So I think we're just getting to that point that Councillor McLean is making for you there, Chair.
Fine. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Laura.
That. I thought that's where I was going. Right, so we're looking at pages 10, 11 and 12. They're all listed there. Obviously, if you've got any particular one, just mention which ward it is and what change, what problems there might be. Any questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Atchwell has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Moving of one of the Southwark and Wickham wards from Knoll down to Fontley Road. I believe that's 186 electorate. I just wonder what the logic is behind that one, please. Because it's maybe 7-mile round trip in the car. It's not walking distance.
Happy to assist with that. The moving of that polling station, the majority of that electorate do actually live on Fontley Road. And when we lost the polling station that we had on Fontley Road, we moved that electorate to Knoll. That ended up with about 13 complaints, because I am aware that you can't drive directly through Fontley Road to the polling station at Knoll. So we managed to source another location that is on Fontley Road. So we've gone there, and hopefully that will improve the access for those electors in that road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very sensible solution. Thank you, Karen. Any further questions on these permanent changes? No, can't see anybody indicating. So we'll move on to the temporary changes. So temporary changes are listed on pages 13 and 14 and 15. Any questions about the temporary changes?
Chairman, if I may just make a small correction.
Please do.
In Bishop Sutton, St Nicholas Church does not have a hall. So I just welcome clarification that will be in the church itself.
Yes, I can assist there. It definitely is in the church.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, right. Anyone wish to speak about anything else on this topic before any debate? There are a nice quiet lot tonight. So I think that just takes us to the recommendations then. The recommendations start on page 7. A lot of recommendations.
Sorry, Chairman, I missed the call for debate. I would like to say a few words, if I may.
Yeah, please do. I know it's difficult with the signing into the chat and every time.
Yes, I do apologise, Chairman. I just wanted to actually pay tribute to how much work it has taken to get all of this sorted out. It's not been easy, and we can see from the volume of changes that a large amount of field work was necessary, and I think we ought to thank staff for the work that has been done to make it as safe as possible for everybody to vote in May.
I'm sure we all second that, won't we?
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for raising
Yes,
that.
Chairman, I would love to second that. Fully agree.
Yeah. Good. So move to the recommendations, as I say, on page 7 and on page 8. Do you wish me to read them all? Or?
Happy to agree those, Chairman.
Agreed.
Yep, agreed.
You've agreed. Right.
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Thank you very much. I don't hear any dissenting voices, so that recommendations are agreed, and that concludes the formal business. But as Margot has already said, I think we should thank the officers for all their hard work in this process. It's not easy, and we hope that when it comes to the time of the elections that we will be a bit freer to move around, and that they go ahead in as smoothly as possible. So Thank you very much for attending tonight, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Cheerio.
And I think
The recording has now stopped.